It's a Tuesday. We did our tiers earlier today. Those are on the Odyssey app. If you missed them, tearing off the events at the NFL Combine, now in full swing in Indianapolis. We heard from Mike Vrabel earlier today in Indy. You heard it here on Jones and Keefe on WEEI. Let's react to it with Tom E. Curran, NBC Sports Boston, on a Tom E. Tuesday. Tom E. Curran, how we doing this week?
Tremendous. What's going on with you guys?
Oh, we're doing very, very well. I know Phil is in Indy. We heard Phil Perry asking some questions. We were reacting to Vrabel earlier today. What jumped out to you from his press conference?
Phil and I talked. He said, hey, what do you want to ask about? I said, I want to ask about timeline. I want to ask about, this is a team that Bill pronounced was in a rebuild in 2021 or 2020. He said everybody understood where we were. Mayo last year proclaimed that it was a foundational year. Basically, we're going to see where we are. And I wanted to hear whether or not Mike Vrabel would articulate the same thing. He avoided doing that, but then when pressed, did acknowledge that, we are getting started on a lot of things here. It's not a magic wand. We can't fix the whole roster and through the draft or free agency. So I think that they don't want to put it out there publicly, and I understand why, but I think that's one of the biggest subplots to this year, expectations and reality.
He also did a couple of radio interviews after the fact, and one of them, he was talking about they want to add enough players in free agency so that they could say, here's our roster, we can play right now, and then let the draft come to us. We've talked with you a lot about how free agency has changed over recent years, and there might not be a lot of great players available to you. So what did you make of that comment, to be that aggressive and add that many players via free agency?
I think that walks hand in hand with when he was asked about free agency, when Mike said, we are going to be hopefully aggressive. Now, I think that rabbit-eared people like Jones would say, oh, my God, that means ownership's going to step over and not let him pay. But I think
honestly, basically, yeah.
That's a pretty good Jones.
Yeah, that's not
we don't have a lot of people do good Jones impressions.
Curran,
that's pretty good.
Curran does a good Jones. He does, yeah.
I also have the hand gestures, but I'm doing them in my car. But I think hopefully aggressive means I can only be as aggressive. I can say that I went, balls to the wall to get Ronnie Stanley. And if, as Eric DaCosta of the Ravens just acknowledged when he was at the podium, we feel like we're going to get something done, yay, we were aggressive. We didn't get him because he didn't want to come here. I mean, and Jones, you can say, which I'm sure you will, you have to make him want to come here. There is a point, isn't there, Adam?
Yeah, well, it depends.
You can just say, I can't get the guy.
Well, it depends. Vrabel said in a separate answer, like for Ronnie Stanley specifically, it depends on how you view the tackle position. I think that's kind of his one-car analogy, where I don't know that I love the 4 or 5 cars on the lot, so I go all out for the one car. Personally, I think at wide receiver, I would have less of an issue if they didn't get the top shiny object, because I think there are a lot of options. I know you might have to trade for some of them, but I think, wide receiver to me has, in his analogy, 4 or 5 cars. Tackle kind of has the one. So I would have more of an issue with not going all out on Stanley than I would at wide receiver, personally.
I agree. I agree with that. But then I do think that you have to first understand that he might never get there, which goes back to what Rich is saying too. So that's the bitch of this, is you look at the team and they get so much cap space, and they have the 4th overall pick, and last year they had the 3rd overall pick. But that's why I alluded to the reality of where they are. They've been so desperately bad at player acquisition for more than a decade, whether it be draft or free agency, that you can have all great intentions, but people are going to look at your team and go, I can make almost the same money here, and I don't have to uproot my family and go up there and be part of a rebuild that I just doesn't look like it's got traction yet.
Yeah, you've been talking about the suck tax for a while and having to pay a little bit more for this team. And, Vrabel talked a lot about compensation and opportunity. So the opportunity is across the board here, just about every position but quarterback, whereas the compensation, that still remains to be seen. Do you think that they have at least one contract this year where they're kind of uncomfortable about it? And they're like, in a vacuum, this guy's not worth that, but we have to do something. We talked about how Alex Bregman's a great player, but $40 million for one season for Bregman is pretty aggressive. Like, do the Patriots have an equivalent of Bregman up their sleeve?
I think that's a great question. When he alluded to what we saw in the Super Bowl, meaning the trench warfare that occurred between the Eagles and the Chiefs, and the fact that the Patriots have been held hostage by their offensive line for several years now, at least 3, ever since they said goodbye to Shaq Mason or Joe Tooney, it seems, and Trent Brown receded. It's been not good. So I think it would be an offensive line ace up their sleeve. How do they get to Ronnie Stanley before he says, "No, I'd rather stay here"? What's the cap situation there? Because in this instance, opportunity is not available to offer to Ronnie Stanley. He already has a better opportunity where he is, so you can only give him compensation. You're blocking for one of the best teams in football with a powerful running back and a tremendous quarterback. Ronnie Stanley from the Ravens at left tackle is not going to say, "Boy, I'd love to come out there and block for Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson, for a 4-win team." So that's where the compensation has to come in. I would think that would be where you would overspend. You're pissing up a rope with T. Higgins. I really think that. It's just find somebody else. Don't spend $40 million on T. Higgins, which by the end of it is probably what it's going to cost.
All right. Well, Tom.
Drop that one, Renee.
Tom, counterpoint, though, and you can check out all of Tommy Curran's latest at NBC Sports Boston. He's doing these positional resets for what the Patriots have and what they don't have. I would say the counterpoint at wide receiver and why you would just want to spend for a guy like T. Higgins should he become available, or trade, a boatload for a guy like Higgins or Metcalf or Olave or George Pickens or whatever. You went through the history of the Patriots at wide receiver. It's staggering.
Yeah.
It's not just Bill.
It's unreal.
It is the way you came up with it. In the last 50 years, there are 7 better-than-average Pro Bowl-level wide receivers with a total of 7 Pro Bowl appearances. The list in the last 50 years. Stanley Morgan, Irving Fryer, Troy Brown, Terry Glenn. Troy Brown, by the way, an 8th-round pick. Terry Glenn, Deion Branch, Julian Edelman, and Pop Douglas. That's your list. So wouldn't that be a reason to really go all out, spend, whether that means free agency or in terms of draft capital via trade? Isn't that a reason to do it, since they suck so bad at it no matter who's doing it?
Yes. Trading. I'm a big proponent of trading. It's the insane outlay of cash, I think, to a wide receiver that kind of uproots your room a little bit. I don't know. You can have it both ways. Maybe I'm just not a T. Higgins believer, and that's probably maybe coloring what I'm saying, but this is something that I talked about last year, and you can go and get T. Higgins, and you can have Drake May, and then you can still turn around and say, "My God, we can't block anyone. Why can't we get the ball down the field?" Well, it's because you guys didn't bother to go ahead and staff your offensive line. So I get sickened every year watching the postseason tournament. Tom, it's playoffs. All right, the playoffs, and saying to myself, what's in common with all these good teams? Well, they can all block. What can't the Patriots do? They can't block. I mean, Mac Jones, again, I'm not saying Mac Jones was a godsend, but he never would have been as horrendous and embarrassing as he appeared to be in 2022 if it weren't for the fact that they just gave him absolutely no place, nowhere to run, nowhere to hide.
Mel Kiper's latest mock draft had Will Campbell going to the Patriots at 4. And so, I mean, obviously you can debate that, but whether they spend big money in free agency or not, I mean, you could always ask for both. But do you think they would go first-round pick offensive lineman and then just plug that player in right away?
I do, especially if you don't get Ronnie Stanley or Alaric Johnson from the Rams, who's the second-rated free agent offensive lineman. He's about 18th overall on, I think it was Pro Football Focus rankings I saw, or Florio's, excuse me. But yeah, if you're walking around in April and you're still going, oh, well, maybe we can find the next Chooks Okorafor, then you got a problem. Mm-hmm. So you have to address it. And when people say to themselves, my God, Will Campbell's not a 4th overall pick, go back to the simple, look, all drafts are not created equal. Some years it's good, some years it's not good. And the 4th overall pick might be the 15th overall pick in 2023. Sorry, that's what it is.
Does that underscore kind of the problem? This is where we started the show today before we played some of Mike Vrabel here on Jones and Keefe on WEEI. We kind of started with the Patriots are just, they're not in an ideal spot. It's not a good year to have a ton of cap space, and it's not a great year to have high draft capital. Like, Last year was a really good draft to have the third pick. It turned out it worked out great. There were 3 quarterbacks. You got the third one, and you wound up in a great spot. There were more than 3 quarterbacks. If you like Bo Nix and still believe in Michael Penix, rather, et cetera. This year, maybe not so much. Does that just kind of underscore, yeah, the Patriots have this draft capital and they have this cap space, but it's not the greatest year to have those things?
Right. So, I mean, now we're in the second rebuild of the decade. The 2020 rebuild that Bill acknowledged after Brady. We have to get ourselves set. So 2021, that rebuild consisted of basically what the 2025 rebuild is, or 2024 and 2025 rebuild is. You took a quarterback. You spent an unbelievable amount on free agents, which the Patriots did to an extent, but all in their own players because it was such a bad class. They're going to have to do the same thing. So if you're going to rebuild every 5 years or 4 years, which the Patriots have had to do because of the path of the franchise, then sometimes you're not going to hit everything. Like they hit on Judon, they hit on Hunter Henry. They didn't hit on Mac Jones for a variety of reasons, but you're exactly right. So you don't want to be in a place where your program has deteriorated to the point where you're relying on going to the market and finding people. You should have found them in the first place. And if you didn't, well, that's why you're back in this thing and trying to do something that's really hard, which is build a team from people you don't know and haven't developed.
You know, in addition to talking about free agency and the draft, Vrabel also spoke today about both of his coordinators. Right off the rip, it was about Josh McDaniels, and I know a lot has been made about, who hired McDaniels. Was it Kraft? Was it Vrabel? And just sort of when you look at the rest of the coaches on the staff versus McDaniels, like how do you break it all down now that, these two guys have been, I guess, together for about a month or so, but they're about to really kick off here the draft, free agency, and the whole real offseason together?
I guess to me, I continue to come back to what do you need? What does the ill patient on the table need? And this ill patient that's on the table right now needs someone like Josh McDaniels as opposed to somebody who can have intricate, involved, new, fresh, never before seen ideas, which I think Keefe's a huge fan of. And I look at McDaniels as, look, that would be nice if we didn't know that I have a general practitioner standing over the patient here who has seen everything, and he can come up with a treatment for it. And that's why I think Josh McDaniels is a fit. And I don't think it was a force on Vrabel or by Vrabel. I think is what does the patient need? It needs a steady hand. It needs a competent hand. It needs an experienced hand. And that's why I think McDaniels fits in my estimation.
Tom, I'm curious. Well, if I'm not mistaken, you haven't talked to Elliott Wolf as a collective media group since last August, end of the preseason, leading up to the regular season. What do you want to hear from Elliott Wolf when he speaks tomorrow at 1:00?
Ownership of his mistakes. I want him to acknowledge that it was his responsibility to have a plan in place for offensive line. It was his responsibility to draft wide receivers who had developmental upside and could be counted upon to not have these inflated senses of self-worth and then produce for you 12 catches between the two of them, between Jalen Polk and Javon Baker. I even want to go back a little further and say to him, how did you guys arrive at Tyquan Thornton and Jacoby Myers out and Juju Smith-Schuster in? And why should we have faith that you can pick a wide receiver to play for this team? Because you're not good at it from every indication. And how much ducking, bobbing, and weaving does Elliott Wolf then engage in? And buck passing? Because that's been my biggest agitation with Elliott Wolf is this condescending, know-it-all, lack of humility, bravado that accompanies his public statements. And then you look at it, and there's no there. He hasn't done anything, literally, whether it be Cleveland when he was there. What great revelations did Elliott Wolf bring about? Whether it be Green Bay when he was basically riding in the third row of the minivan. What did he do there? So to me, I want to hear from him. Why should people have faith in what you're doing when it's not been good? Because do you have a great spreadsheet and people like your grading system? Yay. Find a player.
I don't know if you saw this, but Steve Smith, the former wide receiver, did like a full breakdown on Jalen Polk and some of the receivers with the Patriots, and basically taking all of the blame off of Polk and being like, he was coached wrong, and this guy's actually pretty good, but he wasn't getting any help last year. Do you subscribe to that at all, or what did you make of that?
I just go anecdotal and I ask, why was he in the end zone 2.5 feet from Austin Hooper on that touchdown pass to Hooper when Polk was not stout enough? It was on the left sideline. I can't remember which game it is. I think you guys remember it too, because it bothered me so much, and it probably bothered you and many fans. But Hooper's catching the ball at the front left pylon, and Polk was supposed to clear out and go to the back left pylon. Just keep going. But he wasn't able to keep his line. He got forced out of bounds. Then he kind of quit on the route and turned around and started waving his arms and brought more people into the area. It's just, that's not coaching. That's a lack of, nobody tells a player to just stop your route if you can't get past your guy. Just stand there and start waving your arms around. I mean, who told him to drop 4 balls and catch 12?
Yeah, or be out of bounds against Miami, like that sort of like in the end zone against Miami.
I disagree with Steve. As great a receiver as he was, I do disagree.
Yeah, Drake May was kind of echoing.
He was targeted. Listen to this, because I just did it. He was targeted 33 times. He caught 12, and he dropped 4 of those.
Bad coaching.
My God.
It's bad coaching.
It's not a great ratio really, for him. But.
Yeah, I mean, Drake May was kind of echoing some of it, like he expects those guys to break out this year. I personally do not. Before we let you go, Tom, you a combine guy? Do you like the combine?
To an extent, I think it's interesting when you watch. You know what I like? I like the gauntlet drill.
Keefe hates
receivers.
it. Keefe, we were trying to talk Keefe into it. He hates it.
That's not true. I don't hate it. These guys were talking up all the positional drills. I was like, well, some are a little bit better than others.
I like the wide receiver gauntlet drill. Okay. You know which one I'm talking about, where they run down the line?
Yeah.
And they have to hold the line and boom, boom,
drill,
boom, boom. I love that.
Yeah, I get it.
Sterling Shepard was my favorite in that.
Oh,
he never moved off. Neither did Luke friggin' McCaffrey.
Nice.
Or Lad McConkey, or whichever one it was.
Maybe both.
The good one.
Lad McConkey would be the better one.
Not that big. They're very similar.
That's true. It's true. All right. We'll put you down for a good combine. Thank you, Tom.
Tom, we appreciate it as always. Thanks so much. Talk to you next week on our next Tom E. Tuesday. Check out all his latest NBC Sports Boston all over BST and Early Edition and all of his positional recaps that he's been doing. He has the wide receiver group. This would shock no one on a scale of 1 to 5. The need is a 5. It is a big need for the Patriots.
Who do you think? We already said there's probably only 3 people that can do multiple reps of 225 at the station. Mm-hmm. Who do you think would have the best 3-cone drill?
Oh, Agile.
Courtney?
Maybe.
Yeah. Who would
Not
be
me?
No.
What about you?
I think I'd fall down.
I wouldn't shortchange yourself over there.
I don't think I could do the 3-cone drill.
Okay.
At this point in the day. Vertical jump? Best vertical jump? Ted? Probably Ted.
I was going to say Ted for the 3-cone too. Ted probably would crush most of this stuff.
I feel like he shouldn't be allowed to be part of it.
Yeah. No, if you were actually in the NFL Combine,
him and Wiggy's done.
Yeah. I bet Ted would do well at most of these.
I was going to say, Ted's probably still in the same shape, so I have all of his Combine numbers from when he was in the Combine.
What do you got?
His bench press, 28.
That's it?
I feel like he could do more.
Hart did 31, he claims.
Broad jump.
Soft.
Yeah.
10 feet, 1 inch.
Sounds like a good broad jump.
Seems like a long ways.
Yeah. So I got neck size there?
No, I think you'd win.
Broke the scale.
Infinite symbol.
Yeah. Vertical jump, 31.5. Nice. That's good for a hoss.
Yeah.
He was 6'3" and 3/8.
You got a 40 time there?
Yeah, I do. 4.84. I think he'd probably.
It's not flying, but it's not.
I mean, it's not slow.
No, it's slower than Jamarcus Russell. We read it earlier, but
for a big middle linebacker.
Yeah, no, it's not bad.
20-yard shuttle, 4.35. Got 9.25-inch hands.
Nice.
32.5-inch arms, and he weighed in at 248.
Okay.
It's probably the same across the board.
I wonder what the play-in weight versus present day weight. He might be able to shave a little bit of time off on his 40. Quite frankly.
Yeah.
Okay. Good numbers there. I like the combine. We're combine guys.
I like the combine myself. Yep.
You like the NFL combine. You don't like the Jones and Keefe combine.
So far, I do not.
You like the
I've
NFL
been
combine.
struggling with it mightily. You can go to at Jones and Keefe on Instagram and watch how bad I am at all these things.